to view. We are recording the meeting. Roll call. We have Randy Rausch here. Lisa Bloom here. Bill Berg
Here.
Jill Twigg here. Will Hackler
Here.
Patrick McPhillips
Here.
June McNeil
Here.
and Lisa Martin on the committee members. As faculty and staff, we have Robin Ivy, Nancy Haynes, Brad Morgan, Dr. Reese, and the others back there. Right? You're not sitting at the table, so I'm not going to call you out over here.
Side for the.
Yeah, reply to.
That's it.
May I get, we are going to remove the minutes from the consent agenda and bring those back next time. Is that okay?
Yep.
Is that okay? Can I get a motion to remove or approve the consent agenda that is published?
So moved.
Second, and
Without the minutes.
yes, that and June. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Moving on, I'm going to ask that we allow Meredith to speak first, and then we'll go to public comment so that you can have your notes back. Is that okay? All right, Meredith is the student representative. Go ahead, Meredith.
So for new updates for the student council this weekend, actually, last week we had our Veterans Day celebration, which was very good. We had over 20 veterans in attendance, which is really good numbers for us.
It was lovely. I attended. It was very lovely.
And this week we're selling candy goods for Thanksgiving, but all of our proceeds are being donated to Lucy's Love Bus, which is a cancer charity to help children, to help them receive free therapies. And actually upcoming next week, we're doing is Powder Puff, which is at 5. And just in December, we have our winter craft fair on December 7th and we're planning out with outside vendors and lots of different, our school clubs, and they're gonna be selling things, and it's just for fundraisers. For our sports teams, in our state tournament, field hockey, we lost in the Sweet 16, and then our girls soccer lost 2 days ago in the Elite 8. And for Giving Tree, which is basically philanthropy at the school where we raise money and presents for families in need during the holidays. We're beginning to distribute trees with tags on them, like basically describing what families need, and different, you'll see them inside the schools and local businesses. So feel free to take one, and if you can, just take one and fill out the tag, and just if you want, you can get the item that's on the tag and then donate it. I think that's it. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Yes, and Giving Tree, pick them up as you leave, right? They're right in the lobby.
They should be. And they're just.
Awesome, thank you, and congratulations for the Sweet 16 for the field hockey, and the soccer team went on for the Sweet Elite 8, sorry, I didn't know. It was great to see. All right, now we are on to public communications. And we have Diane Roland. Is she here? Diane? Diane. Rochelle. Your last name, Rochelle? Rochelle, I'm gonna ask that you come up to, so we can.
I took the time to write this out, so I didn't miss what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
I understand some of my comments and questions may be premature, since the public comments are before your presentation, but I would be remiss if I didn't address them. I understand the school committee is looking to close Ashby Elementary and Hawthorneville and move the children to Spalding, Nissitissit, and possibly Squanicook High School. While I understand the budget has been an issue for years, I feel like this would be a last-ditch effort. I wanted to know if anyone has done A transportation study to see if the increased cost of busing kids further away to school and the longest time a child would physically be on the bus. I want to know if anyone has physically measured the space at the schools in question, Spalding, Squanicook, Nissitissit, and the high school, to see how much physical space is available, how many students will be in each classroom by grade. Currently at Hawthorne Brook, 7th and 8th graders have 30 students per class. How many more are going to be added to that amount? Is there a fire code regulation for how many you can put in a classroom? Is there a legislative reason or how many could be in a room at time? Excuse me. What about the lunchroom? Currently they eat by grade. 7th grade, 8th grade, you're looking at 200 plus kids. Can they accommodate that? Are the kids still gonna be able to get their recess if you move 8th grade to the high school? How are you gonna integrate 8th graders into upperclassmen? Are you gonna keep them separate? What are you gonna do for the transition? I represent CPAC, so I have kids who are, you know, have anxiety, depression, disabilities and other things that transitions just day to day are a struggle for them. But now you're talking about uprooting them, busing them, you know, 2 towns over. Are you going to have open houses for them? Are they gonna have an opportunity to meet teachers? Are they gonna know who their teachers are? Are they gonna have a chance to tour the school and meet other kids? These are all some of my questions. Squanicook doesn't have a kitchen. If you move kids over there, what are you gonna do for the meals? What happens to the old schools? You shut them down. If we have a surge in population and people move to the district, are you just gonna be able to open the doors? Or is the state and OSHA gonna say, you have to bring those schools up to code before anybody further goes in? And then you smush more kids into a classroom. These are all things that are concerning to me. Sincerely, there is not enough room at any of these buildings to accommodate all of these children. So I know you're gonna have to split up where each child goes to the school. And someone made a comment online who said, I would rather close the district schools than lose teachers. But how can you not lose teachers in the process? Because you can't tell me that the teachers from Ashby are gonna have room at Squanicook and Spalding, and you can't tell me that the teachers at Hawthorne Brook are all gonna have their own space at Nissitissit. So you have to have staff reduction. And I have gone over the budget since last year, and I know that staff is the #1 expense. So at that expense, how are you gonna know how many teachers you need for next year? When are these teachers gonna be notified? And what are the measurements for deciding who stays and who goes? This is just some of my questions that I've come up with off the top of my head as a parent, as somebody who supervises lunches. And I could give you a mile-long list more. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that the last time you guys made an arbitrary snap decision and removed librarians, it was the librarian herself who came to this meeting and educated all of you that you were gonna lose valuable resources for these teachers if you didn't pay for them because you were removing librarians from elementary and middle school. Before any of this is done, I kindly ask that all of these questions I have and more are researched, debated, and finally made a decision on that's going to make sense for the students, the teachers, and the parents of this district. And I think if you come to all that, I think you'll realize that closing schools is not in anyone's best interest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then. Arsenal?
Hi, Jen Arsenault. So I have a different suggestion. I'm from Pepperell, sorry, and I feel like this district is kind of a dinosaur. I don't think that Pepperell is in the same place it was when Townsend and Ashby and Pepperell got together to form this district. I think we all have different interests at heart, and I understand the need and desire to want to keep your school. But at the same time, I feel as though Pepperell is putting in enough money tax dollar wise, because we've been bled into by the towns like Dunstable and other areas where people can't afford to buy a house. That you move in, you buy $1 million house, you expect to have a district that's gonna be able to meet your needs. So we don't wanna bus our kids either. We don't wanna be paying $10, $11, $12,000 a year to bus our kids. I understand that you wanna keep the buildings open, and maybe you can do that. Maybe what can happen is Townsend and Ashby can be their own district up until eighth grade. Pepperell could be their own up until eighth grade, and we keep the high school as a district that's shared amongst all three towns. I don't see why that's something that's not explored. I don't think the answer is to keep cutting into the capital funds. I don't think the answer is to keep kicking the ball down the field. Obviously, we're all trying to keep something afloat that's not working. We all have different interests. I think that's an okay thing. I think things evolve over time, and that's something that really should be explored. I don't think that trying to breathe air into something that's clearly sinking is going to work much longer.
Thank you. Diane, is Diane, hey Diane. She's the chairperson. Lisa?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, there was another name, Patrick McPhee.
Yep.
Was
He-
listed, I don't know.
He decided not to.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that it's not, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. All right, my chairperson report. All right. We have some happy news here. I'm gonna share that Robin Ivy was awarded the Executive Assistant of the Year for the Massachusetts Council of School Committees Administrative Person. She was awarded last Friday. And Superintendent Morgan, Dr. Reese, and myself were able to celebrate and give her award at the Cape.
Yes, I'm sorry, I just saw a message that I missed from 5 minutes ago. Diane Rollo is online and would like to speak.
So I'm just gonna put it out there on the, it specifically says on our agenda that you need to be in person or you can't be in person, submit it. So it's certainly certainly up to you, Bob. And yeah, we don't have the capabilities of doing hybrid. Yeah.
Does she have something that she would like to submit?
Or do you want me to have her email something to read?
We can do that.
Okay. Or she's on, so I think she can hear us right now. So Diane, if you want to email the committee, it will be read aloud in the meeting.
We're gonna move on for a second, while we'll get that. Brad, did you have a report?
I do not.
All right. I'm going to ask for the new business items, since it is the setting of the school committee goals, the superintendent goals, and the talking of the church. I think we need to move these to a different meeting, as I think the goals really need to focus around setting of the budget, and we have a big budget discussion for that. Does anyone have any concerns about doing this on the committee? Is it okay to move to the budget? Everyone is good with that? Moving to the budget? Okay. Did you send something? Or no?
Yeah, no, she's asking for the email. We can circle back to it at the end of the meeting. Or whatever.
I do have a statement that I'm gonna read. I'd like to remind the school committee that we are charged with providing the best education for our children of our district. That being said, there is always going to be difficult decisions and discussions, especially since we are held to the constraints of our budget, the money. We don't have it. The state's not handing us the money. We need this discussion to be transparent and open to the public. So the public, the caregivers, and our taxpayers truly understand the financial crisis that North Middlesex Regional School District is experiencing. We are at this crossroads due to unfunded mandates from the state and federal levels. And the state funding formula for regional schools is broken and not funding us appropriately. I think it's safe to assume that the state and federal governments are not rushing in to help us today. In the future, perhaps. But the wheels of government take time to do their work. It's time that we do not have. NM can't wait. We can't wait to educate our children in our towns. We need to educate them. So we need to answer this crisis locally. Look up the screen. We're gonna display what the funding we need to fund. It's a $3 million funding issue that this district is facing. We have two options that we are going to discuss and lead in discussion tonight. We're going to talk about overrides, and we are going to talk about the closure of buildings, a 1.5 million staff cuts, and 500,000 in maintenance and technology and curriculum. All of these things impact our communities and our children greatly. The thing I don't want to get into is the weeds, meaning we will not be going line by line in our budget and talking about it. We will not be talking about who is getting cut or the configuration of our schools tonight. We need to give Brad and his team a clear direction where to take us. It needs to be transparent to the public. And I have one closing remark. We need to be kind to one another. I don't want anyone fighting, yelling, screaming, or running out of the room. This is going to be civil, and we're going to handle it swiftly. All right, now I'm handing it over to Will, and he is going to discuss our issue.
Great.
Yeah, we got it.
So obviously, Monday night, we have the public forum, and we're gonna be discussing these things. We talked about this a month ago. We obviously had our workshop, we spent, and I'm sorry, the man's name there. Did spoke earlier, yes. What was your name again? Rochelle, thank you for your comments there. So, we did meet in executive session last week. We spent 3.5 hours in that meeting discussing a lot of things. Obviously, we did an executive session because it certainly becomes very apparent on the individuals when you discuss buildings and things like that. So it's not our place to do that necessarily in public, but, certainly we've talked about it. Here's our early estimate, as you can see. Straight, as I look at it on the math side of things, $3 million. We had 66 million last year, so $3 million, roughly 5% increase over the prior year. And if you've heard me talk before, or if you look in the details of the budget, roughly 40% of our funding or revenue comes from the state. The other 60% comes from the towns. So if you back into the math on that, I'm sure we have some math teachers here that we can talk about this, but you're talking about an average increase to the towns around 10%. So I know that last year these attempted overrides didn't necessarily go through. The towns have sent us the letter that, we're relying on the discussions from them that they can afford a 3% increase over last year to the towns, not 10. So as much as we would like to consider an override, we certainly need to discuss Plan B. And Plan B with cuts considers building or buildings and a lot of staff. And this is the spot we're in. So whether, none of us like that scenario. I understand that, especially, in the town here, as a taxpayer, as someone who has kids in the school or has had kids in the school too. I know this is not a good situation, but the state and in the 10, 11 years that I've been dealing with school committee here, the increases we get year over year have always been a fraction of a percent. Just the increase in costs on inflation just puts more of a burden on the towns every single year that we do that.
Discussion.
I just have a clarification. In our packet is a budget summary that has 2.9% increase. Does that include all of these increases? And does that $3.2 million projected over FY 26 take into account what would be 5%, oh, sorry, 3% to the towns?
No,
Okay.
no, the 3% to the towns. So we're at 66 million, 3% to the towns. It
So like
comes in
less than
like,
it's like a 0.5% increase, less than 1% for the budget increase for the towns to go through.
Right, but what is that amount? I mean. Just so you know, the number that we're shooting
Actually, I have
for is 3.2, it would be level funded, if I'm reading all this correct, or listening correctly. And we're, letting know it's to the towns.
that map somewhere here.
So you're asking for what a level service is, or what the 3% would be?
How much, for level services, I'm assuming this is the level services budget that we got put in front of us, so we know exactly what it costs to keep the services we have now. But you need to minus out the 3% the towns say that they can, afford. And then we know how much we have a gap between what the towns can afford and what we have for level services.
The gap is like 2.9 right now.
Okay, and that's fine, but it is a
Yeah.
different number.
Well, that's not the gap, that's just the increase over prior year, so
Right, that's what I'm asking.
without debt.
I'm asking for that gap.
Yeah, so the increase year over year, 25 to 26, the increase without the debt service is 3.287. That is where Will was mentioning is like a 10%. It's actually more than that though, because we
Right,
slightly more.
so if we're going.
So then if
for
you're trying to
3%,
get that to
number would
3,
not be-
it's being. It would be 66,113 to get to 3%. So it's less, it's 0.05% increase in the budget or $29,000 to get the town. So we basically have to level fund the budget to give a 3% essentially. Because we have less revenue.
No, I understand that.
So the only place to play with is the towns. in that case.
Yeah, no, I do understand that.
I have a question, just because I haven't heard it talked about yet this year, but I recall moving to the GIC for health insurance would be a savings this year. Is that still happening? And what is the savings on that?
Excuse me, so we would have to talk, we would need Anne Marie to weigh in on that. Part of moving to the GIC involves some level of negotiation and some level of cost sharing as well, at least for the first year. So last year was unknown as to whether or not there actually would be a savings after the cost sharing was implemented. Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm not saying that properly. And actually, I think that the health insurance we got this year ended up being pretty fair and pretty comparable as far as a price increase goes. So I know that that's something that's ongoing, that's being looked at. We do have a consultant looking at that for us. And looking, essentially weighing the pros and the cons, but we do have to wait until all of the claims have been settled from last year to see where we stand. Because when the Neshoba Minuteman dissolved, we still have some outstanding claims that have not been settled as of yet. And that process has not been completed. Likely gonna take a couple more months for that to happen, and that's something that they do not, that's not something that we have any control over. So we do have to see where we stand to see if there'll be anything coming back to the district, which is unlikely, or how much of the money we have set aside we'll have to use to cover those claims.
Okay, but to switch to the GIC, wasn't that like a January deadline? So we would be missing that again?
So that's something, again, a consultant is looking at the options for us as we have doing it on our behalf last year.
Do we have an idea when we will have that information from the consultant?
Not until our claim settle. So it'll be very close to January, but it's very possible that even moving to the GIC after it's negotiated, it is possible that there won't be a savings compared to what we currently have. And it could initially cost the district more money based on my understanding through what's negotiated as far as cost sharing in year one.
Out of district placement number that's up there, I know we're already over for the year, and that's an estimate from that. Is this also taking into account that if we have more out of district placements, that we also get more circuit breaker next year that we could put towards this, so it's really not a one for one?
Yeah, this is assuming we're gonna use additional circuit breaker.
Questions on the slide?
I'll just add, I do think that the biggest problem that we're facing is obviously if we move FY 25 level service budget into this year, that's the number that we're looking at. And even talking about an override, that's something that we likely won't have an answer to until at some point in June. If and when that election happens. So if we do have to cut that amount of money, that is not something that can wait until June. Obviously, we're looking at collective bargaining agreements and things of that nature. We do have to pay attention to any type of layoff dates or anything with regard to that. But on top of that, we also have to be able to schedule buildings. And scheduling the buildings at the high school level is something that could take a couple of months. I would imagine it takes a similar amount of time to do with the middle and elementary schools as well, so that we can make sure that they're properly staffed. So I think it would be very, very challenging to wait for an override vote in June, because if it weren't successful, having to make that type of a reduction at that point in time would be very difficult, to say the least. As I've said before, this is not a North Middlesex problem. It's happening in Groton, Dunstable, in Boxborough, Nantucket, Brighton. Pretty much every regional school district is encountering this. And it's due to an antiquated funding formula, which continues to base its funding formula on student enrollment as opposed to student need. And student needs are going up and enrollment is plateaued. And we get year after year, we get the same amount of money from the state. North Middlesex is not really getting any benefit at all from the Student Opportunity Act. And the governor has stated that she will not look at other educational issues until the Student Opportunity Act is fully funded at the close of FY 27. And I think the Student Opportunity Act last year gave us an extra $30 per student, which doesn't even cover the cost of a full-time.
This quick question, restore stabilization transfer of $150,000. Again, I'm looking in our packet that we have the draft FY 26 general fund budget. It has, right, I know this year we cut it for FY 25 instead of 250,000 going to the capital stabilization, we only put in 100,000. The draft here is showing 400,000, making up what we cut last year from this year.
That's includes the OPEB,
That includes
so it's
the-
150 OPEB and 250 stabilization
Okay,
in that fund.
got it, thank you.
Problem.
Yeah, okay, I see. Stacy, the line.
Wrap around.
Yeah.
More discussion? Are we going for an override or?
I think it's the only responsible thing, how much, this amount, probably not, we'd have to discuss what we would go for, but. We are all on this committee and we are all charged by all the community members to present the best possible education for the students. And I think we would be remiss without trying. I agree, we need to plan.
No.
Because last year we didn't get it, there's no guarantees we're gonna get it, and I have no problems going down the pathway of planning if we don't get it. But I cannot stay on this committee, if we don't even try.
Anyone else?
Just a question, so when it comes to the override, and again, that's something that the community absolutely has to decide. That the only concern would be is that if these decisions, if a decision is made. And we're actually making a decision to reduce, whether it be buildings or staff. In lieu of an override or waiting for an override. It would be, just with the educator shortage that is out there now, I think it would be extremely challenging to fill any vacant positions that we have. If we have, in fact, laid off staff as part of a plan to reduce that number. I think a June override vote would be, the turnaround would be too quick to fill positions if we were awarded those positions back. So I don't know if there's anything that can be done if there's a push for an override to have an override ballot done in the winter.
I'm not sure the logistics of that, that would have to be discussed, I think, with the towns.
Again, the only concern I have is that
And I can understand
it's
that.
very challenging to find teachers now and to find paraprofessionals now. So to find them after we've lost potentially a large number would be extremely difficult, because I know districts are hiring people with emergency licenses at this point. And on top of that, even that pool has become very, very thin. Jobs that previously would garner 400 applications 10 years ago are garnering less than 10 now, and many of whom are not licensed appropriately for those positions.
I know that, most town meetings don't happen until May, but I know that they run their elections April. Chuck? Because Pepperell did it, that had a special town meeting and got it on the ballot, so it got into the April ballot. So towns can have special meetings to get it to the town ballot, so it's an early one. And since they all run an election in April, possibly they could put it on the April ballot.
I'd be certainly open to that. In the winter time, I'd be a little leery that our numbers would be way different than what we need, and I'm not sure if the process of being able to change the amount that we're asking for after a ballot vote has been gone through. I wouldn't want to put a number there, and then when we finally get numbers from the state and other things, that we have really good news, and we don't need everything that we asked for by a large amount.
Because Nancy, when do we get the numbers from the state, like the true numbers, and we know?
No, the numbers never.
In the-
but-
Yeah, we don't know until July, but they get the governor's proposal comes out towards the end of January.
So January. Because I don't know the appetite for the towns to run a special election. I'm not sure. We'd have to talk to the towns and make sure that they're willing to run their elections too.
Yeah.
So. And I know Dave is in the background, Dave from Ashby is in the background. I don't know if you have any insight on what Ashby wants to do with their, if they would run a special election. Yeah, that's okay. I don't want to put you on the spot with it, but, I mean, you could run the election. So maybe we charge the town liaisons figuring out if the towns would run a special election. When do you need the time for that? I mean, do we want to do,
I mean, I would have to talk to the middle and high school, the middle and elementary principal. I know that come April, the high schools, for all intents and purposes, scheduled at that point in time.
so we would need to have an earlier election than April?
It would be great if we could have it close to the budget adoption if possible,
In February,
March.
oh my.
Yeah, and then there's also the public hearings, which I
In February.
think in February.
Right. And everything sticks, as is. At some point, we are going to need the state to step in and fund us.
We go too late, are we gonna have the same situation we had last year where the override fails and now it's too late to. Either it's almost too late to cut teachers, that happened last year, right? We had to cut teachers before we knew we saved a few and then have to. What do we do then? If the override fails and we're still at 3 million that late, what can we even cut? Because I mean, the first meetings we had, the discussions where I need answers on specific things by November or December, in February, now we're pushing to March. So I just don't want to be caught where we are next year and burn what little capital we have left and have, you know, buildings that all do need work and all could have an emergency.
I would think that we would need to have a plan in place in December of what could occur if the override does not pass. And to plan for that, because there is no way to cut potentially over $3 million from the budget in April or anytime after that point. It's just, there's no way to do it. It's not possible, because then at that point, you're talking what's likely just going to be a cut to staff of $3 million, which is, it isn't even, it's not even possible in the school district. So I'm missing something. Dr. Reese, Nancy, feel free.
I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I think we can go for an override, figure out a number, that we think, you know, what we think we can from that, go for an override and plan for not having an override.
So December, have a plan for the non-override.
Does the plan need to be finalized, or do you just need to have what it's going to be so you can take a couple of months to work out the details?
I think that we need to have some plan in place that if the override were to fail, what our fallback position is going to be.
In general terms, like, we're gonna, you know, cut so much in staff, cut so many buildings, cut this, cut that,
Yes,
but not the details.
No.
Okay. So I think we can certainly give direction, as far as what would be acceptable to plan for by December. Provided we get information, that we need to make those decisions. And at the same time, look at the budget, figure out, you know, what we think we can live with and go for an override if that's the case. Because I do understand that sometimes big change takes a lot of time to plan, and that's fine.
This is a. We want to. Discuss what kind of changes. We would be okay with. And think about it and then come back. In December.
And we can certainly discuss things and discuss information that we don't have to date, and when we're gonna get that to make any kind of decisions.
What information, and then we need to discuss what information is needed that we need to get. And I know some of the information that we need.
Right, some of the information I've already discussed with you, if we are going to, cut a building or more than one building, the capacities. What capacity are we at the district as far as how much free space there is? What does one building cut due to that capacity? What does two buildings cut do that to that capacity? Because I will not cut and leave us no capacity to increase in the future. It's not fair to the district, it's not fair to the towns. We need room for a little bit of growth, whether it be, the towns or MBTA towns for Ashby and Townsend, I believe both of them approved it. So that's a possibility of families coming into the district. You never know when a development comes in. Pepperell had one on the table for a little while with 100 families. It's not on the table anymore as far as I understand, but you don't know when things like that happen and you cannot cut your capacity in the district to nothing. So I would definitely need to know those capacities before I made any decision.
Yeah, but we don't have to hold the capacity. And I'm working with Jen on that information, so. June.
No, I just wanted to say that I do support, pursuing an override over building closures, and massive staff cuts. I don't think 9 people in a room should be the ones making the decision for everybody in all of the towns, that we need to let the townspeople have a voice and decide whether they want to support this or not. And I just wanted to mention too, that Diane Rollo did send a statement. So I want to make sure that
I will, I did see that she started to say that.
Yep.
I didn't want to interrupt the discussion. I do. Yes, it is hard to be on the 9-person team and make this decision. And it is going to be up to the townspeople to step forward if they want this override. But that being said, even if they get the override this year, we could be back next year asking for another override. So I want everybody to understand that, and it's important for the public to understand that, because the costs are not going down. And the state is not stepping in for a few more years, possibly. So to make that clear, it's not maybe the last time that we will be back asking for another override.
If we have our budget, we shouldn't be back next year.
And we,
Can't say how long, but the last time we had an override, it lasted 12 years.
and we were back doing an override last year.
Last year was 12 years, 2012 when we got overrides before last year asking for them. So we want to come back this year because we did not get one.
Yes. But again, with costs going up and possible even funding going away, we have to tell the public we could end up with another override. I think it's important for them to understand that as well.
I have a question with Randy. So we didn't do it for 12 years. How did we meet the budget? Because the costs have gone up, income hasn't gone up. So we've done it through cuts over the years.
If you take a look at our historical increases in our budgets.
Yep.
Over the 12 years, the average, there were some years a little bit higher, some years a little bit lower, but we averaged somewhere around 3 to 3.5% increases. And obviously, that's over the 3% for the towns, and the towns have been able to accommodate that in some of the years that have been higher. There's some growth that happens in the town, so sometimes they can accommodate more than 3%. I know they've had cuts, we've gone back and forth in years that we haven't increased as much. They've obviously had more for their towns. So we have not had, 8, 10% increases in our budget, year after year after year.
So the last time we did this and it failed, the first time we sent the budget back to the town. And it got rejected, we didn't make any cuts. We didn't make a single cut, we just sent it back. That was my first meeting. I feel like if we don't actively make cuts and show them that we're trying, this override's not gonna pass.
Right, and that's what I said, I didn't say we were necessarily gonna go for that number, we need to discuss what number we would like to send, look at our budget, see what we think we can do.
With that being said,
Without being detrimental to the towns or to the students, and we'll see where we come up.
with that being said, I don't know how 7 buildings is feasible at the rate we're going.
It may not be, but again, I don't have information to even know about capacities to be able to start to talk about whether one building or any buildings can be cut in the district, so.
We've started that work.
Chair, I move we direct the superintendent to put together a plan B, which includes closing buildings and reducing staff in order to cut this deficit. Projected deficit.
Can I have a second? Can I ask a question first? Are we gonna do a plan A prior or just discuss?
Well, sorry, plan A. Sorry, this is plan A.
Okay.
My,
Between now and then, are we gonna continue to work on finding cuts in the budget prior to the override?
I think we have to, that's what I'm saying, we need to work on it.
And it's like, it will be, the finance committee will look at, subcommittee will look at things, I mean, we need to help in this. It is our budget.
No, I understand that, I thought we'd be doing that. It was. Plan's nice to come up with a plan.
Plan tonight is to direct the superintendent to start working on it.
And what kind of boundaries, we haven't discussed boundaries, what it can and cannot include in that. Or leaving it open. And then we'll
So
vote on
we
that.
made the motion, need a second, then we discuss it.
Second, so we can assess it.
I would. Why not give the boundary of 3 point? Whatever.
Because, the education of the students and what we as a board feel is the direction of the district is not all about numbers. I can probably come up with $3.287 million, all kinds of different ways in the budget that are not good for towns, they're not good for the students, they're not good for teachers, they're not good for any of the staff. So boundaries.
Agreed. But if we don't have something to look at, to vote on, which is our charge to vote for this for the townspeople, then we have, what do you? We have nothing.
They've discussed some boundaries. I mean, are we gonna allow him to come back with a, plan that puts 35 students in a classroom? Do we want to put a limit on that? Do we want to put a limit on the number of buildings? If he comes back and says, you know what, I think we can squeeze everybody into the high school and we're gonna get rid of 5 buildings. Again, do we want to put boundaries? I know, I mean, I'll talk about the elephant in the room, which is Ashby Elementary, which has been on the chopping block and talked about for 5 years now. I would put that as a boundary that Ashby does not get looked at. Not unless it is an absolute 100% last resort, and the reason being, Patrick, let me finish.
Cut me off, sorry.
Is-
Yeah.
Um, We value community. All right, it's in everything that we do. We talk about how we have a partnership with the towns. And we need to make sure that we have strong towns and strong town services along with our budget, that we can educate the students. We talk about, community as being something that helps everybody. And yet, some people want to put one community above another. In Ashby, their community is around their schools, as it is in a lot of schools, or a lot of towns. I mean, if we go back, the 14 years or so when the Fitz in Pepperell was closed. That was a hard thing. There were a lot of sewer, people that were very upset with that building closing. It was, something in the town that had been there for a very long time. People had very strong feelings about that building. But they had alternatives to what that building stood for. They had alternatives for the student-centric and the kid-centric and the family-centric things that went on in that building. And that brought the community together in that building. They were able to, they do town meetings, they do voting, they do all kinds of productions and everything in other buildings. The Fitz, wonderful thing now that is now, after many years, become a community center. But it did sit for many, many years and was a very big controversy in the town about what was going to be done with that building. In Ashby, they have the same kind of community around their school. Kids know it's their home in their town. Families come together for events there. Community comes together to see the kids perform. They have their town meetings in that hall. They do a lot of community work in that school and what that school stands for in that town. They do not have an alternative. Taking that away from that town without an alternative would negatively and for a very long time hurt and damage that community. So how can we say that we're for community in one place and not in another? Those are the reasons why I look at Ashby as something that we really need to work at to try and preserve. It is not the only alternative in the district, but it is the only alternative for now.
Then I'll come back to Patrick. You have it, you would.
It, just from a financial standpoint, it is one of the older buildings in the district. It's not owned by the school district. It houses the least number of students, which gives it the highest per student cost. I understand all those reasons. Ashby will still own the building, and if they want to do that, they can turn that building into anything they want. If they want it to be a community center, they can vote and fund it, and that's fine. I feel like I'm getting a lot of flack over looking at, from my first day here, what I've heard from Will is we have too many buildings based on the DART studies. Based on the third-party studies I've read, Ashby was even looked at and suggested with dollar values to get it up and running. And I keep getting $300,000 thrown at me, and that's literally a drop in the bucket based on the studies that were done before COVID. If you have a better way, I'd rather save whatever amount of money we save on teachers and close a building than have to cut more teachers and save a building that is still financially struggling. All of our buildings are struggling. We don't have capital anymore. We can't maintain 7 buildings. If a roof goes on one, our capital is gone. It's just not, it's not practical. And if you want to prevent another override, you need to cut overhead.
And I'm not saying that we shouldn't.
But taking things off the table like Ashby,
I said.
Randy's this way.
taking things off the table like Ashby, like just handcuffs Brad. I mean, you said, what if he wants to throw everyone in the high school? I think Brad's gonna come up with educated decisions. His job is to do what's best for the district and the students as well. Like, I just don't understand what boundaries you would set. 30, 35 per classroom. We're talking about cutting 1.5 million in teachers. We might hit 35 per classroom without even touching the schools or looking at the schools, and need more still. So just putting boundaries on it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I keep hearing, oh, he just wants to close Ashby. I would love to close no schools. I'd love to be fully funded and have a fun time here talking about what we could spend our excess money on. That would be great. We don't have that option. And this is a hard decision and it's not fun. And I agree, everything has to be looked at, but we've met. We've met and talked about these things. We've looked at the budget. You had one list of suggestions that maybe had like a couple $100,000 in savings, maybe. But I'd still rather spend that on teachers than on buildings. I just don't understand what we're doing here.
Thank you. First, I wanted to say thank you to Randy for conveying a lot of Ashby concerns. The school is the hub of our community. We have pretty much no businesses, no stores, no anything. I went to school at Ashby Elementary, and when I bought my first home in Fitchburg, I knew when I started a family that I was gonna move back to Ashby because I wanted my kids to go to school at Ashby Elementary. Because that's how much it means to people that live in that town. That aside, if we're not gonna talk about what's best for the students and the community, we have to think about the long-term effects from closing a town's only building. Already, based on discussions over the last few years, we've had people moving out of town based on threats of closure. And if this is pursued, we are going to lose more families. If the school closes, we will not have new families moving into town. Ashby enrollment will decrease, and by default, Pepperell and Townsend enrollment will automatically increase when we're basing a number of 100%. And that doesn't even count the people from Ashby that might move to Townsend and Pepperell. So Townsend and Pepperell budget numbers will definitely, no matter what, be increasing if Ashby Elementary closes. So you have to think about the effects that it will have across the demographic of our entire community. That aside, well, anyhow, I do think that Ashby should be completely off the table. It is a safe building. I'm the Ashby Elementary building chair. I just toured it even as recently as a couple days ago. And the boiler redundancy, we have the second boiler now. That's no longer a question. The tunnels were abated. Pipes can be fixed if they need to, if something goes wrong. There's not the lingering safety issues that people were talking about. Our town put up $300,000 and addressed that already and is making more improvements now. All of that aside, what my original comment was going to be, and though I do think Ashby should be completely off the table in this, is that I don't think we should be charging Brad with any Plan B or anything right now. We just put out a press release to the public. And in that press release, it said, community input is vital and will guide the committee's decision-making. We have not yet received any community input. We haven't had our forum. That's Monday, and we're 4 days from now. Let's give the community a chance to give us some more budget cutting ideas. Let's let them tell us what is important, what they might want to see off the table as well. Let's hear what they have to say. We can't put out a press release and say that it's vital and it's gonna guide our decision-making if we're not, and we're just gonna be making decisions on our own anyway. Let's start with that, and then let's give the community an actual chance to respond. Because it also says we'll accept a small number of questions as time allows. That does not give people chance to digest what's happening. It does not give them a chance to reach out and respond. We could have a line of people and say, sorry, we gave everybody, the first 5 people 2 minutes and we're not listening to anyone. I don't want that to happen. I want to actually be able to listen to all the other people that have input on this so we can really make an informed decision. So I do propose that we have a second follow-up forum if we're not gonna allow enough community feedback at this initial one. But I don't think we should be having any vote or making any decision on anything until we actually listen to the community.
So I know that it's important to listen to the community. And it's hard, because I do see the fighting amongst all the three towns. And and every town is unique in its different ways. But it doesn't answer our $3 million issue that we're facing. We need to figure out a plan to tell Brad, because it's not fair to the people in our audience that are listening either. We need to give him some kind of direction.
It's not fair to tell them that they're gonna have an opportunity to give input and make decisions without their input.
Sure.
Well,
I hear you, Joe. But I have to disagree with you. We are elected by those townspeople. Our job is to make a decision. Our job is to do something about this piece of it. And, you know, I've sat here on this a number of years, and I can tell you that people have a very little comment that's come out of it. They expect us to do this. This is our job to do this. So, yes, I mean, it's important to get input, but it's important for each one of us to go get input. It's not necessarily important for us to hold 47 meetings and, you know, and make sure that everything's done. Our job is to vote. And if we don't vote on it, we're not doing our job.
I don't think anyone said we're not going to vote on it. I think we're asking for information.
She just said,
Tonight, because we don't have information.
right,
And we don't have the input from the community that we asked for in 4 days. So I think there's a general sense of what would get us there already. We've been presented something. We can certainly throw that out there. I don't know if we're gonna be discussing some of those on Monday. So there's already a general idea. And from that, I'm not ready to vote on a specific direction. I would like to have more information and set some boundaries, because no, even if we have to try and cut $3.2 million, 35 in a classroom is not acceptable to me. So, I mean, if we vote tonight, we're just gonna vote down anything that comes up that's not acceptable. I think it's only fair that we give the superintendent an idea of what we actually might be open to.
Well, is the vote just to have him look for options? Am I missing something? It's for him to just look at all the possible options. So we're not finalizing.
Options are different than coming to us with a plan.
Yeah, options give us a lot more flexibility than the plan.
If it's options, fine, you wanna throw out options, that I can vote for. If it's just individual options and things that we can do to cut, and then we can go through that list and say, yes, yes, no, yes, yes, no. That's fine, but the motion, I believe, was to come to us with a plan B, which is a whole plan of what he thinks is going to, and we're not setting any boundaries for that one plan. So,
welcome to amend the motion record. You're just trying to get us to vote to give him direction.
I will amend the vote that Brad brings options to start working on options for the school committee to consider, to be able to give him boundaries on full plan. Second,
Lisa? All right,
I'd get a comment that, the direction we're gonna give them, what you're, proposing is to give Superintendent Morgan put together a plan with, a plan of boundaries.
no, to put together a plan of options for us to take a look at so that we can set boundaries on what would be acceptable to us. To be able to put it together in a plan.
How many
I
plans
would-
are we talking? Just one or two?
I mean, how many plans is this man gonna have to come up with? Or options? I mean, he's only one person. Let's be clear.
She's asking.
Oh, I asked how many.
No, it's not just you, it's.
Oh.
Sorry.
Sorry. I think it's because we're facing this way, talking.
All right,
Okay.
My intention was not to have a full-fledged plan put together, but a list of options and how much it would save. So that we can take a look and see.
So. We're going around and around on this. What are we talking about for timing? So our next meeting as the full committee is December 3rd.
Or we could schedule, I'm saying
At
that
the
we
moment.
should probably schedule one for December 3rd. It's on a Tuesday. Should probably be held in person,
That's not on the schedule yet.
not on the schedule.
No, it's not. The
Yeah, so
regular
we're
meeting is
moving.
scheduled for the 12th.
So
She's talking about adding a meeting.
Yeah, I'm thinking that we need to schedule one for December 3rd. It is on a Tuesday because coming back from the holiday, I think everyone should have the Monday.
I was gonna say, depending, I mean, depending on, you know, how much time Brad would like to have for coming up, you know, and putting down the options, I believe that there's already a number that he has already. We can meet as early as next week, next Thursday after the, community input. We can discuss, get their input, and then discuss boundaries.
I think I would like more time and give them more time. That's just my feeling is that we need to give them some time, give them the holiday, allow them to come up with their options. Because it does. I mean, Jeremy has worked on things and everybody, and you see, we need to allow them some time.
So, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we have a building committee meeting on the 3rd, so if we could move the time to 6:30 or 7, that would be good. Thank you.
And this one on the 3rd would be in person.
So would we be asking the superintendent to, Superintendent Morgan, to, come up with a list or a menu of things, of cuts to make? Or are we asking him to put together a proposal? If we did this, we could get there. If we did this, we could get there.
I was looking for a list because it is a lot less intensive trying to put them together. So if we're gonna close one building, yeah, if we close this building, it's this kind of a savings. If we close this building, it's this kind of savings. If we cut so many teachers or staff, it's this kind of a savings. If we look at cutting the curriculum and technology that came up, it's this amount of money that we're looking at.
And we could use that and the
Right,
input
and then
from
we
the
can take a look at
community.
that and say, you know, okay, I can see doing this, I can't see doing that. I mean, otherwise I'd be happy to sit here and at least throw out some ideas about some boundaries. I'm happy to sit here and throw some out and vote on, as a committee, on some boundaries for him now.
I think boundaries is the bad word here. I think maybe if we called it something else, it might be better.
Robin, what is the amendment we have?
Sweet Jesus, you really want me to talk about. So we have two motions on the floor.
Correct.
The first one is your motion.
Yeah.
And the second one is Randy's, which is to consider or to develop a list of options and savings. So we would need a vote on whether to amend the first and then an actual vote on the motion.
That's.
I think that we need some level of, if we're gonna put the time in, which it is a considerable amount of time. I'd rather have some idea as to what the parameters are, so that we're not wasting time with a parameter that won't even be entertain. If that makes sense. So, excuse me,
It makes sense.
I just don't wanna put time into something and then say that it's not something we're willing to consider. And that's just, it's not just me, this is not done in isolation, this is done with a team of people.
So. Sounds like we need to put parameters on it. To allow him to do this. But do we want? To give him the options first, come up with options. Take that vote and then. Clear that off the floor and then come up with a list of parameters for him. How do you guys recommend doing this? What's the? Like we vote on
Yep.
saying he needs to do options,
Come up with some options.
the options for us. We take that vote, give him that. But we have the parameters to go through and say, these are what we want these options to reflect. Does that make sense to everyone?
I mean, no offense, but I'm opposed to the amendment because if we're just gonna get a list of things to do to decide from there, what if that doesn't get us to the $3 million we need?
If we're gonna go for, say, some parameters, and I do like that word better. Some parameters, then I'm fine with taking that off and going for, some plans, but just understand that depending on what our input is from Monday and from the community, it may change some of the things.
And then we're gonna have the opportunity to come back here December 3rd and discuss that.
Just wanted to make sure that that was on the table. So I will rescind my amendment.
I think we have to,
We have to
just,
vote.
we have to vote
Vote it
on your
down.
amendment, just.
We'll vote on your amendment, and if that
Is-
fails, then
Yeah.
we go back to the original.
I won't be able to put any time into this tomorrow. Just to clarify.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
So nothing's gonna be in the day before the warming.
No, you have December.
Okay.
You have December.
Okay,
You're gonna vote on the,
So
on the
I'm-
amendment
This is the amendment.
to amend the
Which-
original motion.
Randy is now saying that she's going to rescind and not have on. So everybody's clear. Are you ready?
Okay, why are we rescinding? I'm sorry.
You're not really rescinding. You're,
Right, my amendment was just a list.
Okay,
So we're reverting back to a plan, but with parameters.
Or was that plans?
Of plans.
Plans, yeah, so.
All right, we are taking this vote. Everybody ready to vote on the amendment?
yes.
Patrick,
No,
Jim,
yes.
Randy,
No. No, this is the amendment that I had that we're rescinding.
you were, it's.
it's okay.
I thought we were voting to rescind it.
No, no, there is no rescinding.
Just vote yes or no.
You're voting it down.
I'll just abstain.
Lisa,
No,
Bill.
No.
Jim.
No.
And myself, no. All right. Now, we're moving on to the original, what is on the floor.
All right,
Do you want to?
so I'm gonna read what I wrote down.
Yeah,
So I wrote, I move we direct the superintendent to put together a plan B, which includes closing buildings, reducing staff to reduce $3 million. That's what I wrote.
and Patrick has a second on it, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Is that clear with,
Is that clear with
Yes.
everyone on the committee?
okay,
Okay,
No.
Bill,
yeah, just that, so, your proposal is just to come up with a plan.
that's what I wrote.
Okay,
A
no, I'm.
plan B,
Okay, I'm
that's
just.
all that I wrote,
Okay.
yes. We want to change that?
so yours just mentions buildings and staff. Could we put in any other options? So what if he finds money somewhere else that's not building or staff? Kinda.
I wrote, which includes buildings, reducing staff to reduce the $3 million.
Okay,
So if there's a flaw in that,
I just wasn't sure if that would stop him from finding other options that aren't buildings or staff. which I would love for him to find.
Probably should have never said what you're saying.
Just throwing it out there. If you think that covers it, I'm fine with it. I just want to make sure.
But what if I put in or
Perfect.
other items, line items? How do I don't.
This is just this,
Or say
Just-
included but not
Just-
exclusive.
And everything. I don't think it needs to be. Imprinted.
because I think what would be good to
Yeah.
see was in the event we decide, or it's decided that we are gonna have to close buildings. Is it possible to close one building and do this, this, and this? Two buildings, and then we have to do this and this? I'm just asking my question, and I guess is,
Yeah.
does your proposal cover that?
I say yes.
I think it does.
Yes.
It doesn't have to. I mean,
Okay.
I
Mr.
see.
Morgan, you're here. Does that make
Yeah.
sense to you, what we're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Good, so it's good as this. Second.
Yep.
All right, and your second.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now we're taking a vote. Is everyone ready?
Yes.
Right. Patrick,
Yes.
Jean, yes. Randy,
Yes.
Lisa,
Yeah.
Bill,
yes,
Jill, Will,
Yes,
myself, yes. Now. The parameters. And discussion on them.
I think we should take closing Ashby Elementary off the table.
I can't disagree anymore with that.
Yes, you
Yeah.
Sorry.
I know, I get it.
Yeah. I disagree with that. Emphatically.
I think there's a motion. We didn't make a motion. We just said.
Okay, we're gonna make a motion for every parameter, or are we gonna list them?
I think you'd have to, because there could be some I agree with versus that one.
Okay, motion that we take closing Ashby Elementary off the table.
Second. Okay. So. Any debate? Patrick,
So by taking it off the table, if there's an estimated amount of savings we could have there, that cut has to come from somewhere else. So is it gonna come from more faculty? Will those cuts impact Ashby Elementary, or are they just gonna impact the Townsend and Pepperell schools that have the higher amounts of teachers? Whereas Ashby, I don't think can make any more cuts to faculty, just based on the numbers there. I understand that Ashby wants their school, however, they don't have a middle school or high school already. The building needs a lot of work. We need to consolidate, and this building just logically makes so much sense.
I mean, just to play devil's advocate. What if in his plan B decides that Ashby makes sense? Like, that, I don't think we should handcuff him to that piece of it, because, you know, what if I turn around in the next one and say, I don't think we should close Hawthorne Brook, and now we're handcuffing him from any, you know, we're gonna continue to do that? So we're gonna make a motion on every single building? I think it doesn't make any sense. If he comes back to us. Sorry, the superintendent, don't mean any disrespect, I'm sorry, you know, like allowing him to come back with the plan that they vet out before they bring to us, like we've got to listen to that piece of it. If we handcuff them too much, it's gonna make it really hard for us to have anything.
But there's also a lot of work that he's gonna do. If we can tell him now that there's something that's unacceptable, it takes work off his plate. And he knows not to go down that road and spend the energy there.
but I think the point that Will is making is each one of us has a connection to a school. And each one of us could throw up and say, I don't want the closing of my building. I don't want the closing of my building. We're gonna end up in a big tie, is what's gonna happen. And that's not giving the superintendent direction. Jim?
And I think if that was the case, then closing schools would be off the table altogether if we chose to go school by school and take a vote. However, that's not what we're doing. Patrick just asked what would happen if we didn't close. The estimated amount of savings is a one-time savings of $380,000 out of a $69 million budget. Just in a short list of ideas Randy had, was that we identified more than $380,000 that could be saved. So we've already covered that. Then this isn't even counting costs of any renovations for moving Ashby somewhere else or increased busing costs. So for the very, very minimal amount of money that would potentially be a one-time savings compared to the drastic negative consequences of closing it, I do think it should be off the table. And I do think it's a fair thing that we could vote school by school if we wanted to.
Well, as much as I hate to say this, and it pains me to say it, I don't really think that we can take anything off the table. All we're asking the superintendent to do is to put together proposals, and I would suggest that in putting together those proposals, the savings that Randy showed us the other night be taken into consideration with that. And I thought what we were going to vote on, the motion we were voting on was that the superintendent would come up with options. If we did this, if we did that, and now we have options that are out there. But we're putting together a budget. I don't, right now, and these are just proposals, suggestions that we're gonna vote on. I don't know that we can take a lot off the table.
Just to be clear, it's not a one-time savings. Those are expenses we have every year on the building, whether it be admin or,
Right, but that's not building expenses. You still need the teachers to teach the students, whether they're in that building or somewhere else.
But based on the. Sorry, this is an executive session kind of question. It's not, I'm not whispering about.
I would not bring that, but you can say consolidation of service.
Okay. So just based on consolidating services alone, there are positions that would either be moved or savings there. It's not a one-time expense. That's not correct information. And if we can go sit with Nancy at some point and go over that information if you'd like.
I mean, we've talked about it year after year. Essentially, it's a one-time savings because you're not saving anything the next year.
But.
That's
okay,
not
so let me
correct.
clear. What Patrick, I think, is trying to say is, if you take a building offline, there are savings that come out of that year after year, because that building, we're no longer, there's no overhead. So there is a savings that comes with that. That's.
There are more savings than just the
A
overhead.
very
Yes.
small percentage, about 380,000, which is a very, very small percentage of the $69 million.
I think this talk would have to go, that part of the talk, which we can have another time, would have to go to an executive session to actually go over those numbers based on some of the conversations that
I
we
mean,
had.
we've had it year after year. That's very,
I've only been here a year and I've already found it
6 months.
Okay,
quite a
stop.
different number, so.
Stop. All right. Any other discussion, Jill?
I agree with Phil. I think that we should let him do his job as much as we don't want Ashby off the table. He understands, Mr. Morgan understands our position on Ashby, and I'm sure that he's going to come up with something in his plan that doesn't close the school. So I think that putting all these parameters on him, just really, it's not gonna get him to that $3 million. I mean, it's his job. I mean,
We asked the superintendent in putting together the plan B, B1, B2, B3, whatever, that one of those be a proposal that didn't close Ashby. Is there a feasible way to do that? And I apologize, I know it's really a lot of work for you.
Not that, not to answer for you, but yeah, sure we can discuss it multiple building options.
Okay.
We have discussed multiple building options before. We certainly continue down that road again.
Well, if we're not gonna sit here and, actually vote on any parameters, then it does leave it open that, what he comes back with, that we're not gonna vote for. Just so you know,
Certainly a possibility.
Brad, it has nothing to do with, your ability and your team's ability to come up with options. But if we can't sit here and decide and tell you what's off the table, then when you bring stuff to us, there may be something that's off the table.
And I think that's understandable, because we do have, if he lays out the options.
That's fine. I thought the whole idea of giving him direction was so that he didn't go down roads that we were never going to approve.
You know, like,
So,
is closing buildings an option for all of us? Do we think we need to face that?
depending on the information on, capacity in the district. If those numbers pan out, then still leaves us room for, expansion, in the future for, you know, move-ins and things like that. I could consider building closure.
Anyone else?
So without building closure, where is that money coming from? Because we've had these sit downs and that's the end of the day, that's the question. Where are the cuts coming from then?
I'd have to take a look some more. Again, I
Okay.
said, I didn't say it's off the table.
Nope, I
I just
understand.
said that it is on the table.
I'm just asking the question.
That is one of the last things I ever even would think of considering. Among any of the cuts that we would have to make it to $3 million. I think there's lots of options out there instead of, you know, cutting Ashby and doing more than looking at the numbers. We're looking at the students, we're looking at the communities, and I don't think the numbers, are the only thing that we can look at. I think there's different ways to get there. So as much as it pains me to even think about closing a building, if the numbers in the district, don't support, space. Okay, I would prefer it to be in a town that at least has options for what is, the hub and the heart of their communities with their schools.
Okay.
Anyone else? Do we have a motion on the table?
No, he voted,
We vote.
Yeah, we do.
We
No,
voted to
there's a
close.
motion to take Ashby off the table.
I got a second.
And it did get a second, so it was June and Wilson. Right, June, like, was it one?
Yes.
Right, so we do need to vote on this unless you guys want to take it off the table. We have to vote. All right. Are we ready to vote on it?
Yep.
Patrick?
No.
June, yes. Brandon?
yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Phil?
No,
Jill?
No,
Lisa, no.
Jill, I'm sorry, what was yours?
It was no.
Any other discussion? Or are there other plans that people want to? Jim?
I just wanna make a statement to anybody listening that, again, as the press release mentions, community input would be vital in the decision making. So after the meeting on Monday, when you hear the rest of whatever is presented there, please do voice any concerns or also ideas you might have and constructive feedback to the full committee, please.
Thank you, Jim. Anything else? Any more discussion? So, to recap, we have given Superintendent Morgan to come up with Plan B with options to bring back to us at the December 3rd meeting. Is that correct? Is that everyone's understanding? Everyone's understanding? Brad?
I just have one more thing to say.
Yeah, Jill, go ahead.
When we talk about the sped departments in the building, all being in one building for the most part. would it make sense to look at maybe moving K-2 back to Ashby where they have the space for it? Instead of overloading, say at Barnum Brook? Is that something that we could look at too? And then that would give more purpose to that building, is what I mean. Like, it would make more sense to keep Ashby open if we were housing more students over there instead of cramming them all into Barnum Brook. Would alleviate some of those big numbers that we're talking about. I just want it maybe to be looked at when we're doing budgets, that could be an option for larger numbers. If we're talking about closing a school, maybe it shouldn't be the school that has room. Moving, right, like moving that sped those younger kids over to that building again, they were there before. It might alleviate some of the space where we're bulging.
I would agree with you that, all of our district-wide special education or even district-wide, programs, if there's others that are not special education, those are where they are right now at the whim of the, administration on where they felt that it best fit for the moment. And has moved around in the past and can move around again. So I would urge the admin team, when they're looking at space and what can be done, remember those could be moved. That's all.
I wouldn't categorize it as a win.
I'm sorry, you're right,
I would,
I agree, I'm sorry, it did make it sound a little kind of arbitrary. I really didn't mean to make it that way, but just trying to stress the point, that they have the ability to be moved, they're not anchored to any one place.
Sure, and again, just to clarify, I would have to go back and look at the specific numbers, but the reason that the programs were moved from Ashby to Pepperell is twofold. The majority of the kids, just based on the district population that are in the programs, are from Pepperell. I believe that the savings in special education van transportation alone was in excess of $200,000 for the district. And there were additional savings in any of our service providers, so our OTs and PTs. I do not believe we would be able to have a full-time OT or PT that would be handling just that age group in Ashby, which means we would in essence be hiring, say, an occupational therapist as a full-time 1.0, and 0.2 of that may be traveling between buildings. So there's also savings on staff by being able to have our service providers all in one location, and our special education transportation also going to one location where the majority of the students live that are in those programs. There is also talk at the state level of cutting back on special education circuit breaker funding for special education transportation. So that could come in at a higher cost to the school district next year, making it even more difficult to fund that. So the reason the programs were moved in short was because it saved us, I think it's fair to say, a few $100,000. And so it was a decision that was well thought out. And again, from a transportation standpoint, but also having service providers that we're able to have as full-time, that we're actually working full-time and not traveling between buildings. Not that that doesn't work, but they're actually servicing kids as opposed to traveling.
Is Vanpool, and it's just that I don't know the answer to this question, that's why I'm asking it. We don't pay per mileage, right? Like, we have the van, they transport, it doesn't matter where they go. Right?
Do you have an answer to that question?
But I think there are less vans required.
Because special education kids
It's
don't
per
take the
van.
bus, they take the van still, so whether it goes to Pepperell, Townsend, or Ashby. It shouldn't make a difference, and the service providers that we had in the district, and I'm not going against what you're saying, I'm just trying to get a better picture for it. They were traveling before to Ashby, certain days during the week, they would go, you know, speech would be on Mondays, OT would be on Tuesdays. Did we lose providers? Or do we still have the same amount of providers?
I'm pretty sure we've increased our providers because the numbers in the programs have increased.
Right, so why would that change having to drive 15 minutes more down the road? If they're already in Townsend and then they just run over to Ashby? I'm just trying to figure out why your comments, like, they just don't make sense to me, like where the kids are being band shouldn't make a difference where the program is being held.
So
I think,
do you have the background on that?
I'm just
yeah,
trying to
and
be clear.
and I think it does take cost because they have to have that built into their schedule to transport, to go from one building to another. So they lose a period basically.
I can certainly go back.
I mean, we can go back
I
and look,
believe we
yeah.
also had
It's been a
parents who were
while.
driving. I
Yeah,
believe we also, an increased number of parents that were driving as opposed to taking special education band to Ashby. And
right.
again, it just works out because of the majority of the kids are Pepperell students because it's the largest of the three communities.
Right, except the school's busting at the seams.
Yes.
All right, I think we're going to move on to the subcommittee reports, if everybody's okay. All right, Ashby Elementary, June.
Yes, the boiler has been fully installed, that is all set now. We're down to 80 something thousand, that is, we just met with the Ashby Select Board at our last meeting and are determining the final, projects that we're spending on.
And I do have a report on the accelerated repair,
Wow.
as I talked to Suresh, and he is figuring out where we need to close this, and so we should be hearing from him soon. Finally, after 6 years, we'll be there. All right, Will, do you want to schedule a finance meeting?
I mean, we're gonna have to schedule a finance meeting, I just don't know that we can squeeze it in before December 3rd. I'll have to check with the members of the committee, if we can do that.
All right. Randy, on the policy?
Oh, I'm sorry. Off the internet, so I lost the agenda. I can get it on paper.
IIB class size, IJ instructional materials, IJL library materials.
Thank you. So these are up for adoption. I have not heard anything from anybody on the committee or, in, the community on these three, changes that we've done. So I will move that the, school committee adopt policy IID class size, IJ instructional materials, and IJL library materials selection and adoption.
I second. That was Randy and Lisa. Second.
Yep.
All right. I'm gonna go this way. Will,
I abstained because I haven't done my homework at present, sorry, Randy.
Jill,
Yes.
Bill, Lisa?
Yeah.
Randy,
Yes.
June,
Yes.
Patrick?
I need to abstain, sorry.
Okay, abstain.
Sorry, Randy.
2 abstentions, yes. All right, on to warrants. Anything, Patrick?
I signed 2 in the past few days, one for 582,000, one for 180. You report.
Thank you. Negotiations and personnel for teachers, I have no reports from them. Negotiations and personnel, non-teachers, Randy.
No reports.
Community outreach liaisons, June McNeil. With Ashby.
Nothing to report, but I'm in constant contact with the select board and town administrator.
And Pepperell, myself and Patrick, I have nothing to report. Will, anything to report with him?
Obviously, we've been putting together the presentation for Monday night.
And with the liaisons, I do need you to reach out to your select board members and figure out when they can do their elections. As we have talked about, when possible override.
We have no select board meetings in Townsend
We have
to
no-
attend.
We have this election Saturday.
We do have the election Saturday.
Yes.
I don't.
Very appreciate it.
All right, so June, you'll talk with the select board.
Yes, to clarify, so we would be looking for a special town meeting. To put the override on the April ballot or
Probably, we need to probably have a decision by March, so we probably need a special.
so a special
election.
town meeting and a special election.
Yeah.
Okay,
As soon as Nancy gets the numbers and we need to get the report. It will come after the February open or budget meeting. The town budget meeting. Right, then,
Well, there's public hearing requirement
Yeah,
And then you would vote for a budget adopted, and then the town would have the actual numbers to vote on.
and then there's certain time parameters through which we will have to, the liaisons will have to figure out when we need that number, when they can do their elections, if it works. Correct, Nancy?
Yeah, I don't know what the town requirements are as far as how many days for the election, but the school committee will vote by as early in March as we can do it. I think that right after the public hearing. The next meeting and vote the budget, and then we give the towns, and then they have 7 days, we have 7 days to give them the data, and the numbers, and then they will either call if they know they can't fit it into their budget, they'll call a special election. Or on the April election. And then how we do it.
Okay.
I make a motion to adjourn.
There's still public comment.
Oh, there is public comment, so would you? Do
I
you
can
have
read
it
it, I
up?
have it up.
June has it up.
This comment is from Diane Rollo. I have been a North Middlesex teacher for 24 years. As an Ashby teacher, it is disheartening and discouraging that whenever there is a budget issue, closing Ashby is thrown out as the solution, when closing a school should be a last resort. By closing Ashby and or Hawthorne Brook, the town of Ashby feels discriminated against. The solution should not directly affect one town. Our motto is "We are NM." Ashby is NM too. Thank you.
You have a motion for adjourn?
Did?
Second.
Second, all right. Bill,
Yes.
Jill?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Lisa? Yes. Randy?
Yes.
June?
Yes.
Patrick?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, right.